Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Carolina Conservatives. We are preachers with a punch. Well, I am preacher with a punch today because, as you see, my co-host, my partner in crime, the Facebook criminal himself, Pastor Alan Mashburn, is not with us today. But that's all right. He had to go out and do some pastor things today. Imagine that a pastor actually has to do some pastor things today. So Alan is not going to be with us today, but we have a special guest with us, and I am just thrilled to be able to bring him on the show. Many of our listeners know that I'm an educator. I'm right now in a college or university, but I spent many years in K-12 education as an administrator, as a teacher. And one of the places that is near and dear to my heart, where I spent a number of years working with students, is Chatham County, particularly that Chatham Central, Bonley, Bennett, Goldston area of Chatham County that is still so wonderful, so near and dear to my heart. And fortunately, we have with us a gentleman who is running for the school board to represent that area of Chatham County and who is going to be going gung-ho to unseat the chairman, Gary Leonard, who I know very well and worked with at Chatham Central. We've got Tim Moore with us. Tim, thank you so much for coming on and being with us today. Just tell us a little bit about you and why you're running for the school board.
Well, thank you, Dr. Street. I really appreciate Carolina Conservatives inviting me to come along. I relish the opportunity. The reason I'm running for the Board of Education, and it's kind of an evolution of my own personal walk. It kind of came up for me about 7 or 8 years ago. For an employer I was working for, we needed to hire about 6 or 7 industrial engineers for our factories, and I was in the Raleigh area at the time, living in actually the same place, but working in Raleigh. And so we went to NC State, right? Because that's generally, a lot of people think it's one of the best engineering schools in the state. We interviewed 25 candidates, and of the 25 candidates, these are all industrial engineers or other type of engineering majors. 21 of them were foreign born, which I was kind of shocked at. I said, well, that's different. And of the 21 that were foreign born, almost all of them had at least one, and some of them 2 master's degrees.
Wow.
One had a master's from Columbia and a master's from William and Mary, and they were getting their engineering degree. Of the 4 that were American born, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 of them weren't sure they were going to finish their engineering degree. And what I noticed is, I said, well, that's really strange. Why do we not have these kind of hard STEM kind of graduates really coming out of one of our best schools? And I went in and I found out that I did my own research. I said, well, this is interesting. So a little bit of my background. I grew up, I was born in Texas, and I grew up in Latin America. My dad worked for the American Embassy, so I did a lot of traveling when I was young. After college, I went in the Army. That's where I met my wife, and we have 5 children and 3 grandchildren. And while I was in Europe, I got to know and spent a lot of time on the economy. I was there like 4.5, almost 5 years in Italy and Germany. And I've also, in my current career, I've spent a lot of time in Asia, a lot of time in China. And in those travels, I've really looked at what's going on in education and looked at it as it applies to the U.S. So I'll talk about Pew Research. Pew Research, that's one of the things I went and looked at. I said, well, how are we competing with the rest of the world? We always thought we were one of the best educated societies in the world.
That's what we're told.
Huh?
That's what we're told.
That's what we're told, right? So Pew Research, which is a non-aligned, not left or right, not anything, just really a think tank, they went out and did an analysis on graduating capabilities from high school and found that we're not in the top 20 on any of those subjects, whether it's reading, comprehension, writing, or mathematics. There's little bitty countries like Malta and Macau and places like that are ahead of us. And I said, how can that be? That's impossible. We're the ones that brought about NASA, put man on the moon, really invented the internet. But it seems that over the last, say, 10, certainly 20 years, our school system has not focused on the items that they need to be focused on. That's when I started to look at it and say, I've got to get involved here. I've never done politics in my life, never had a desire or an inkling to go into politics. And I really don't think Board of Education is politics, by the way. Because I think kids are all that you should be thinking about, and politics shouldn't enter into it. But I really, I saw that as an issue, and that's my number one issue on my platform is academics. When you look at those kind of subjects, whether it's reading comprehension, writing, or arithmetic, we are so far down. So, like I said, Pew Research says we're not in the top 20 in the world. SAS, which looks at the entire country, says North Carolina is not even in the top 25 in all the states in the country. And then you look at the performance of Chatham County. You know, Dr. Street, we have 4 schools, that very area that you taught around, Bonley and Goldston, Chatham Central, Jordan Matthews. All these schools in this area are all D-rated schools. D-rated, right?
Yes.
And we can't really say we're focused on academics if we're not focused on the basics.
It's
so that's
true.
Number one thing that I'm running on is getting us back to those academic levels that makes our children be able to go out and compete in the world. I can give examples where I saw where there's countries in the world that take it on almost like war. They think they're in a global economic war and they're coming after us. They think they can do better than us, and they're working hard to do that. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think, and we'll talk a little about some of the topics here, some of the subjects that have come up, is I think there's issues around parent involvement, parent input into our education system, parent input into the schools, and also around transparency. What are our schools doing? What are they trying to do with our children? Why do they want not to be forthcoming with all the information and all the books and all the things they want to teach our kids? And then lastly, I would say we need to prepare our kids, and we have an incredible opportunity, Dr. Street, as you probably heard. We have some huge employers coming into Chatham County.
Yes.
It's great. It's a great thing. And I won't talk about Board of Commissions. I won't talk about some of the other issues that'll come up out of that. But it looks as if we did a much better selling job than we did a planning job, because we have all these employers coming in, roughly just on the ones that have been announced, probably about 10,000 employees, which in our world, you and I know, that's like close to 15 to 20,000 kids. There is no place in this county for 15 to 20,000 kids, so they haven't planned on that. But I think there's also something we can do for these kids as they come out of high school. One of the things that I had experience with when I was in Germany, Germany has a very structured high school system. And the way they structure their high school is there's really kind of 3 tiers to the high school. There's a tier that is very academically focused, high-level academics. Those are generally where your PhDs and your hardcore science masters are going to come out of. Then there's kind of a middle-level high school, which a lot of your business managers and supervisors, folks like that, are going to come out of. And then there's this other group that is a trade-based school, where they, the last 2 or 3 years of the school, they're brought into the factories. They learn about, about typical factory type of issues, what's a Gemba walk, how to, what's a Hoshikanri, how to manage a Kanban, things like that you would see in a factory environment, so that when they come out, they're ready to go right on the line, right? And we have that opportunity here in Chatham County. We can work with this VinFast company. We can work with Wolfspeed, or certainly FedEx. I know FedEx pretty well, where we can get these folks to be trained on line type of work and come out making maybe $50,000 a year. Now, granted, $50,000 a year isn't the end of the world. They could still go to night school and get themselves to a level where they want to be a line manager or line supervisor or something like that. But at least out of high school, they would be able to make a living wage, a wage that they could go out and afford a house and start a family if that's what they want to do. And I think we have that unique opportunity, but we're not set up for it academically.
Well, here's the problem, Tim. You're talking, what you're talking about is practical education. Ensuring that students have the tools and the experiences that they need to do what they want to do, whether that be that they graduate from high school and be able to go straight into the workforce. That used to be, a high school diploma used to mean something, but nowadays it's not that, it doesn't mean that much. Or if they want to go on to college, they've got that opportunity. You're talking about giving students many different levels of opportunity. But now here's the issue. What you're talking about is educational, but Chatham County Schools has just spent $73,000 between 2017 and May of 2022 on critical race theory training. Now, what is that going to do for our children for the children in Chatham County, or any other county for that matter, But when you've got these businesses coming in that want you to have skills, have the skill set, the STEM skill set, the technology skill set, what in the world are we doing spending $73,000 of taxpayer money to train teachers how to be anti-racist, which really is actually training them to be racists, by the way, training them to do all that when we should be spending so much time on training students and training the teachers to be able to teach the students for these jobs of the future. What are they doing? What is Dr. Jackson and Chairman Leonard really doing here?
Well, that's a good question, and I think you also have to look at the output, right? So if we look at what's happened in our area, in this school district in Chatham County, and the results just came out recently, we're not doing very well. We'll take Jordan Matthews, which is my local high school here, one of the local high schools. On level 1 math, only 12.9 are reaching grade level equivalency.
Wait a minute.
12.9%.
12.9% of the students at Jordan Matthews are reaching grade level.
Level 1 math. So,
wow.
Yep, and I'll bring it up even on another level if we want to. And yes, they won't call it CRT; they'll call it diversity and inclusion, and a lot of other topics, which I would call more like social engineering or re-engineering.
Right.
If you want to talk about where the social concerns are, and it came out and it was in the paper here, and you mentioned the board meeting, that Alan spoke at. I actually spoke at that one also because I focused on these elements. If you want to talk about inequality, let's talk about inequality of product in Chatham County. So they just got through, and in that meeting, they lauded about how great they are and the results they have and how they've seen improvement. Yep, all of that. But let's talk about that. In this county, 70% of the Black graduates, high school graduates, cannot read, write, or add at grade level. 70%. 60% of the Hispanics can't read, write, or add at grade level. So where is the disparity there? How are you improving society with that kind of number, right? We have to focus on all the students. We have to get a high level of academic excellence. My feeling is 85% across all age groups, all schools, all racial groups. 85%. Now, you could say it's 95. It could be anything, but certainly 85 is a lot better than it is today when you got 70% of the blacks and 60% of the Hispanics that can't, right? So we need to solve that right away. This re-engineering isn't doing anything for our society. Nobody's going to ask a graduate when he gets out of high school, explain to me the difference between equity and equality. They're not going to ask him that, right?
No, they're not.
Factories are going to say, again, what's a Gemba walk? How do you do a Hoshikanri? What do your work instructions tell you to do, right? Can you read the work instructions? Can you operate that machine at an acceptable level, though you don't break it, right? So that's where we need to focus our education on, is on those standards, the academic standards that make us the country that we are.
Yeah, but and I also want to throw this in here just for full disclosure to all the listeners out there. I directly invited Chairman Leonard and the entire school board on this episode today, and to date, as of today, at this time, they have not responded. So that just goes to show you. Now, I know that Chatham County is the school board is nonpartisan. It's technically nonpartisan, but I just want to make it very, very clear that Gary Leonard is a Democrat. He is a liberal. He is a leftist. I want to make that very, very clear to all the folks in that wonderful western part of Chatham County who are deeply red and deeply conservative, that when you vote for Gary Leonard, you are voting for a leftist to be on the school board, who is going to support, who actually said, we don't teach CRT in the schools here. We don't do CRT here. Let me just tell you something. As an educator, I want to make it very, very clear. And Tim, you know this already. You've seen it. They are absolutely unequivocally teaching and incorporating critical race theory into the schools. No doubt about it. They call it, just like you said, they call it diversity, equity, inclusion. They call it social emotional learning. They call it whatever they want to call it. What they are doing in Chatham County schools, and Gary Leonard, either he is A, ignorant about what is actually going on, or B, he has not been truthful about knowing what's going on. In either case, it is a problem, and he should go. So this sort of thing is happening, not just in Chatham County, but it's happening everywhere, but particularly Chatham County now, where they're trying to cover this up and make it look like it's not a big deal and that they're not really doing what everyone's saying that they're doing. Well, they are. And just want to be, and I've heard this, by the way, from teachers and administrators in Chatham County who are saying, oh, yes, it absolutely is a real deal right here in Chatham County. So my question to you is, what will you do if you're able to unseat Gary Leonard, send him back to his leftist liberal funny farm where he needs to go? If you're able to send him back there to his little fantasy land, and you're able to put in some real deal education here, how are you going to deal with this CRT stuff? Are you going to be someone that's going to advocate for shutting it entirely off? Are you going to ask parents what they're going to do? How will you deal with this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, right? So going back to the focus that needs to be is academics, right? So
right.
We have to solve for academics. You'd mentioned the money. The other thing that's kind of interesting is they have somebody on staff, a pretty high staff, a director level, making over $100,000. That is a diversity and inclusion director. Well, first thing I would direct the superintendent, we need to realign that, right? That person shouldn't be diversity and equity and inclusion director. They need to be the academic excellence director, and focusing on how we're going to get academic excellence back into our schools. And I get it that it's not an easy climb. It just needs to be work harder, and that means from like 3 to 5, maybe even 3 to 6 every day. We have some tutoring that goes on for these students. We identify the low performing students. We incorporate that in the discussion with the parents. We are very clear with Mr. and Mrs. Jones that your son or daughter is not prepared for the world based on academic basics. They're going to have a hard time in life if they don't get those up, and we're willing to put this in. And an example how we could fund that, right? The board just voted on and are putting themselves a $5 million brand new building for offices. I've been to the administrative office there in Pittsburgh, walked right in. It was a hot day. I seen a member. It was nice and cool in the offices. The roof didn't leak. I noticed the doors worked okay. I didn't see a need. I don't see a need for a new administrative office, especially for $5 million. Dr. Street, $5 million will pay for a lot of tutoring and educational skills and laptops even for some of these students so they can work on it from home. A lot of tools can be used with $5 million instead of administrative office. I fail to see how a new administrative office is going to help these low performing grades that they have in this county. So again, we have to focus on those academics. We've got to put some more harder work in, some more tutoring, some extra work that's going to need to be done for these students so they're prepared and ready to go. The other piece that needs to happen, as you kind of referred to, is we need more transparency. We've had issues going on in this county, incidences I would call them. To date, I don't know what the truth is. I don't know really what happened because they will just kind of let it slide under and think, hey, this will just go away. We're not going to worry about it anymore. We're not going to talk about it. That's not being transparent to parents. Parents are left to think, okay, well, what really happened here? What was something badly done? It was something just some bad performers. What was the administrative action? What was the punishment given? There's nothing secret that should be there. These are the public schools, right? If we have something bad happen in our political wing over in Raleigh, we get to get told because we're voters. We get to know what's going on there, right? Same thing happens in our schools, but that's not what's happening with the board. They choose not to address it. I've been probably to 10 board sessions, and about half of them I said a statement. Many other people have said statements. They never respond back. Now, I get it. If you're running a board meeting, that's probably not the time to respond. But if I'm on the board and you come and speak, I will get your email. You will get a response from me. Now, I may not be able to do it. It may be on my control, or I may not agree, or I might agree. But you're going to get a response back from me. I'm going to thank you, number one, for coming in and sharing your thoughts. And hey, that's a good point. We'll see what we can do. Maybe not this year. Maybe we can roll it into next year, whatever. But I'm going to respond to every person that comes up and speaks because that's what you should do. They're your boss.
Absolutely.
They voted for you or didn't vote for you, but they are still your boss. You report to the public, right? And that's an important piece. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think we have to have that transparency. We need to set up these parent boards. I'm not going to call it advisory board like they do. I don't know if you're aware of them, but that's a new thing they're rolling out. I guess because of a lot of concerns parents have with some of the books and some of the education material. So what they've done, they set these things up called parent advisory boards. Each school gets one parent, and that parent is chosen by the administrators of that school.
Of course.
Tell me, Dr. Stroot, how open and transparent is that going to be, right?
Not
so they
at
get
all.
To pick the teacher, right? They're going to pick the teacher that agrees with everything they do. And yes, we love you. You love us. It's all great. That's not how our democracy works, right?
No.
The teachers, last time I heard, are a minority in the school. The students are a majority, right? So we ought to have more parents involved than administrators, right? And they should be picked by the parents. So they can come back and say, hey, we have concerns with this. There's a lot of topics that really have no position in schools. Parents should be able to say what their children read. We're not burning books. We're not banning books. We're just saying, these are my children. I can say what I think is right for them. Nobody knows that child better than I do. You can still sell that book on Amazon. You can find it at the public library. I can get it for them if I want. But you don't get to dictate to me what my children get. And that's a basic human right in every country. Well, I can't say every country because some countries I've been to aren't like that. And I'll give you a comparison. Places that this has happened. First place was the Jugendbund. That's the Hitler Youth, right? And Hitler knew exactly where he could get his people from. And there's some people will be for him, some will be against, some he won't convince. But he knew the ones he could control were the youth. Because if you get the youth and you form their minds, then you can take control and say, yep, you're going to do and say what I want you to say. So did Mao. Mao called it the morning sun. And the morning sun was when the kids would get up in the morning, they come in and they start telling them that, hey, we're your leaders, we're your God, and you're going to do what we tell you to do. And by the way, if your parents come against you, you come tell us. And they did. And a lot of those parents were sent off to labor camps, and those children never saw their parents again. So again, I'm not trying to be extremist. I'm trying to say the government, whether that's the local government, the school government, any government has no right to come in and say, we're going to take your children, especially if you haven't done anything wrong, right? But that's kind of how they want to do it. They want to take control of the children and say, we're going to teach them what we want to teach them. No, you're not. You're gonna bring it by me as the parent and let me look at it, right? And I think the parents should have the right to opt out. Say, I don't want my son or daughter reading that book. I'd rather they weren't involved in that lesson plan that day. I'll take them out. I'll go do something with them on my own. We'll go to the museum. We'll do something. And that parent should have that right. But somehow there's this fight going on in the school system. That's what happened in Loudon, Virginia, is, hey, we get to tell you what we do with your children. Don't think so, right? We brought them to school. We didn't bring them to prison, right?
This is exactly right. I mean, this you are hitting all the right nails on the head. I mean, and it's important though that we draw this distinction that these sorts of things, and on this program, if you go back and listen to lots of our programs, you'll see we have hit these books, these highly sexualized books that are in our schools, teaching our children things that should not be taught to children, especially at the elementary age. But these highly sexualized books, the CRT stuff, the sweeping stuff under the rug. Hey, Tim, we just want the school board to just turn around and face the people who put them in office, in Chatham County. That was a shocking thing when I heard. In 21 years of education, I've never been to a board meeting where they actually sat with their backs to the speakers when they were being addressed. That was a Gary Leonard decision to make. So just want to make that clear too. And that was very planned and knew exactly what they were doing because they knew that they were going to get some criticism that night. So they just said, forget what you want to say. We don't really care what you think. We're in control here. So I just want to make that very clear that Gary knew exactly what he was doing by having the board turn around and have the backs to the crowd. Don't care what they say.
Just in case somebody comes back and tells you different, the very next board meeting was in that same room, and they had turned the board back around, and they whatever you want to call it, they had their team come in, their chosen speakers who came in and said, oh, no, everything is great here. We don't need parents telling our school system what needs to be taught. We trust our teachers. We know they have all our backs. We got all this. And they were facing when they did that.
Sure, because that was a message that they wanted to hear and wanted to demonstrate that we care what they say and what you all who oppose us say. We don't really care, and we're going to show you that we don't care. That was very, very deliberate. They knew what they were doing. But now here's the thing too that we need to make sure that everybody understands that Gary Leonard, Chairman Leonard, is governing a board now, is the chairman of a board who is allowing this sort of CRT radicalization of children, who has allowed some of these sexualized books to be continued on into the schools, who has said we don't really care what parents have to say because we're going to turn our backs to it, and then sweeping things under the rug. To date, the teacher who belittled the student at Bon Lee for expressing how much she loved to read her Bible, that teacher still is employed by Chatham County Schools, is still working at Bon Lee, and to my knowledge, never really even got any kind of punishment. So it just goes to show you that if you are Christian and if you are conservative, Gary Leonard and the Chatham County School Board doesn't really care what you have to say or what you have to think. Am I right or am I wrong there?
No, you're right. And I think there was a misrepresentation presented in that next school board that the superintendent and Gary, for that matter, weren't allowed to address the issue, and that's not true. I talked to Ryan, the father, and yes, they talked to him. Both of them did, and they gave him their feedback. And what their feedback gave him was, hey, we see that this was probably something wrong the way it was handled. And I've seen both kind of writings, and even the one that's positive from him, he was in the dead wrong of how he handled it. But what they said was, no, we can't do anything here because this is his first time event. Now, my understanding is he's had other run-ins and other events and issues that happened in the past. But regardless whether it was his first time or not, there should be something, right? There should be something. If it's just, again, I read his account, he was still wrong. Now, I could have, and I think Ryan would have probably been all right with it if he we all know about it now. Again, transparency. Let's just all get into the auditorium and Mr. Lau get up there and we say, Mr. Lau, do you have anything to say to this student? Yes, I apologize. I shouldn't even brought this up. I shouldn't have presented my views. Because if you can't present your views, right, your Christian views, I can't present my anti-Christian views, right? So again, that would be a learning opportunity for everybody in the audience. It would have allowed him to, okay, let's move on. But they wouldn't do that. They said, no, we can't do anything because this is his first time event, which is probably not true. But again, the fact they didn't do that and they weren't transparent and there's whole, well, we don't know if it really happened, what happened. There was nothing put out about the board, about what happened. Again, you're going to leave parents to think what they want, and they probably think, okay, yeah, you did nothing on this. Absolutely nothing. It seems as if it's good, right? So, again, that's not transparent. Transparent is, and you know, I know they think parents are stupid. I have a 4-year degree also. I've traveled all over the world. I deal with all kinds of folks, including lawyers. You don't even have to name people. You can just say, Teacher A did something to Student B. Teacher A apologized publicly. Student B says, I feel vindicated. It was corrected. But they won't even do that. They won't do anything. They won't even bring it up. They won't even talk about it, right? So
I guarantee
you, to deal with these situations, just let it go under the rug and we'll just move on.
I guarantee you, Tim, that had this been a Muslim student, the teacher would say, we don't even know who you're talking about. That teacher is gone, long gone. That teacher would have been gone. Had this been a Muslim student, I guarantee you they would have handled it publicly. But because it was a Christian student and Christians are dumped on nowadays, it doesn't, that they didn't want to handle it. I want to make this clear again. Gary Leonard, we have asked you to come on this program, and the door is still open, by the way, Gary. You can come on this program and you can tell us why you have not handled a teacher that publicly ridiculed an 8th grade girl because she happened to be a Christian and said that she loved her Bible. This teacher pulled her up in front of every child, intimidated every child, bullied every child in that classroom, and denigrated this child because she happened to love her Bible. Coach Leonard, Gary Leonard, why have you not stepped up and defended this child, but instead you defended an adult who's in the wrong? You need to defend the children of Chatham County Schools. And in our last few minutes here, Tim, I have a feeling that you're one of the ones that is going to defend the children. I want you to do two things for me here in our last few minutes. I want you to make your pitch to the people who are watching in Chatham County, in that Bennett, Bonlee, Goldston area, Siler City area. Make your pitch, and then tell us, where can folks contribute to your campaign? Where can they find you online, in social media? Give us that information as well.
Yep, absolutely. So to wrap it up, right? So it's a non-political position, and I look at the results, right? So Gary's been in that role, I think, going on almost over 10 years, almost 12 years, right? And in that 10, 12 years, we have not seen academic progress. If anything, we've seen it go backwards. We've got D-performing schools all around me here. We've got 12% of our kids in Jordan Matthews can add, right? So we've got to go back and focus on academics. We've got to stop this social reengineering in our grade schools, right? You want to do social engineering, which we all kind of see it's happening. You let them go to college, they'll get all the social reengineering they need there, right? But right now, what we need to do is give them tools in their hands that make them being able to compete in a global market, right? Like just basic reading comprehension, writing, and arithmetic. If they can do that, then they have the ability to do a lot of things. If they can't do that, guess what? They can't communicate. And if they can't communicate, it doesn't matter what your social message is, it's not going to go anywhere, right? You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to add and compete in a global market. So that's number one. Number two is you got to start listening to parents. I hope they don't. Just from a personal perspective, right? I hope they keep on with their message, right? Because there'll be enough mama bears and papa bears that are going to come out and they're going to eat their lunch. And that's the way it should be. Go against the parents. See how that works out for you. It didn't work in Loudon. By the way, you just mentioned the Muslims. I wouldn't want to be on a board in Deerfield, Michigan right now, because now the Muslims have found out they're teaching them about homosexuality. And that's not just a few people. That's hundreds of people showing up at those board meetings, and they are ticked, right? So, yes. So I think that's number two. That's what we got to get back to, is get back to teaching. Get parental involvement, understand the parents know what the child needs more than the teacher does in terms of personal development. You, Mr. Mrs. Teacher, you need to focus on academics, right? And then also we've got some great opportunities in this area if we look at how we can improve the livelihood of our kids, giving them some tools when they come out, some trade school tools, or at least getting their academics up. They'll be able to be more competitive in this world. So you asked how you can get a hold of me. My website is timmoore4boardofelducation.com. Pretty simple. And there's some videos on there. The one is the video that I did at the Board of Education meeting, that one that Alan was at. And there's some interviews in there. But by all means, and understand, and I think Gary's an evil guy. I just don't think he's the right guy, right? He's had that for 12 years, and we still see the schools going down, right? And we have opportunities in front of us that we need to capitalize on for our kids. We need to help them so they can compete in this world. And that's what I'm about. I'm about focusing on those kids and giving them solutions and abilities that will give them advancement in life.
100%. Thank you so much, Tim. Folks, I want to just reiterate here as we are wrapping up now. I just want to say it again. Gary, you were invited. Come on. Let's have a conversation about what's going on in Chatham County Schools. We welcome you. We're going to give you a hard way to go because we want to see, just like what Tim said, we want to see some change. We want to see you actually step up and take some leadership. I agree. Gary's a good guy. He is not an evil man, but he is trying to appease the wrong people. And it's time and he's trying to appease his party, which is liberal. So he needs to step up and be the person that Chatham Central, that I knew at Chatham Central. He needs to step up and be that kind of leader at this board, but he hasn't done it. So it's time to replace the people who will not step up and stand in the gap and be the leader that they're supposed to be. Folks, Tim Moore is the man to unseat Gary Leonard. This program, we are saying that he is the guy you need to vote for. Gary's had his chance. He's had multiple chances. It's time to go in a new direction now. And let's send Tim Moore to that Board of Education in Chatham County Schools. My good friends, my colleagues from there in that western part of Chatham County, here's your candidate. Let's send Gary Leonard back to La La Fantasy Land for the liberals. And let's send someone who's got some real good common sense, good business sense to that school board to ensure that our children are going to be given the tools that they need. They're not going to be ridiculed for what they believe in their faith, and that they are not going to be indoctrinated by this critical race theory garbage that Gary Leonard and this school board keep trying to shove down their throats, and hold Dr. Jackson to account for trying to do it as well. Folks, thank you so much for joining here with us. Thank you, Tim, for being a part of this program here today. We are Carolina Conservatives, Preachers with a Punch. Alan, we missed you, but we certainly had a good time today. Folks, we'll see you at the next episode. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Street.